Hey guys, welcome back to the channel McNallie Money, the official home of power mining analysis. Yet again, another big day in the markets for Bitcoin and the Bitcoin mining stocks. Obviously, a lot of excitement in the sector stemming from yesterday's announcement or leak that CoreWeave may be taking a second pass at Core Scientific in terms of a buyout. That's what we're going to be talking about in today's presentation. What do we think Core Scientific shares are worth, and what are the analysts currently saying about this transaction? In addition to that, we also have some exciting news out from Digital in terms of some insider buying, so a lot to get through. Before we get into it, take a second, smash the like button, guys. Big help to myself and the channel. If you're not already subscribed, McNallie Money, feel free to join and let us know in the comment section below if you're currently holding shares of Core Scientific and how much it would take to part with your shares. With that being said, let's get into today's video. All right, guys, TGIF, another week in the books here. This was an exciting one in the Bitcoin mining space. Obviously, some massive news broke in the sector yesterday, Anthony. That's going to be the focal point of today's conversation. Before we get to that, though, a quick update on Bitcoin price and then the miners. Bitcoin was up above 107,000 earlier this morning. It's pulled back a little bit now, just below in the 106,750 range. We've talked about this channel in the 105 to kind of 107 range over the past few weeks on the podcast, Anthony. It's nice to see we've recovered. Let's get into the miner prices, and then we can talk about the main event here.
Yeah, it's been a sort of mixed start today for the miners. Sort of a carry on for some of those miners yesterday. I mean, bear in mind the likes of IREN and CORZ Scientific really rallied yesterday on that news from CORZ Scientific and the communication from the Wall Street Journal and other leading publications to highlight this potential merger and acquisition of CORZ Scientific by CoreWeave. And so today's, again, nothing new come out from those discussions or anything like that, but the share prices for a number of those miners with effectively power that's going to be directed towards HPC co-location services doing fairly well today. IREN doing really well, above $14 a share now. That's up 7% today. It was as high as $14.29, so it's pulled back a little bit. That's probably because the Bitcoin price has come back down. Cipher having another good day as well. Cipher's having a great week, to be honest with you. $4.17. Core Scientific increasing its change from yesterday, well over $16.60. And if you look at some of the volumes today, I mean, IREN's already 50% higher volumes than its average trading day. And we're only like 3 hours into the market, so really strong volumes. Cipher at 42 million shares. Their normal trading volume is 19, so that's double their normal. Core Scientific 40 million shares. Their average volume is only 14, so that's nearly 3 times their normal trading day. Digital, we know, is very high. So it's 35 million. It's only generally about 15 million. Don't forget, there's a dilution going on there. And their share price is at $2, which is the price of the dilution. And we've talked about this before. When shares get increased because of a dilution, then the market will take account of that and value effectively the whole stock at the diluted price. But the rest of the stocks, some of the pure play miners not having a great day today. That's probably linked to the Bitcoin price. So CleanSpark down, Mara's down as well. Bitfarms is down and still below that $1 price target there, so they have about 6 months to get that price above $1, otherwise they fall out of line with the Nasdaq rules there. And then HUT is the sort of the least performing miner today. They're down 5.5%, and actually that's quite interesting because HUT themselves, although they haven't announced something, they've effectively said they're going to direct a lot of their power towards HPC co-location. There was some rumours at the end of last year that suggested they were going to move into a county with Meta and provide about 400 megawatts. That hasn't materialised yet, but the company haven't come out and made any announcements whatsoever. Probably making sure all the I's and dotted and the T's are crossed. But that's just a quick wrap through the share prices today. Obviously not as good as yesterday. Some massive increases yesterday in terms of in terms of Core Scientific and IREN, and Cipher having a good day yesterday and following on today. So same as yesterday for some of those miners. Other ones not performing as well today, probably mainly to the Bitcoin price.
Yeah, it's interesting. Even TeraWulf, they're obviously an HPC player, but they've already announced their contract, so they're not getting the benefit. It's really the potential HPC players that have yet to report a contract.
They had a strong rise yesterday, so maybe a little bit of profit taking. So who knows that? But they've got a 16 megawatt contract with Core 42. So, one of the few miners have got a co-location contract in place. So, and looking to increase that in the near future as they roll out more power at their Lake Mariner site.
Yeah, exactly. And I think Hut 8 may be the same thing. The market is already assuming that deal's been inked. So interesting to see the split there, Anthony, but no complaints from our perspective as many of these HPC plays fill up our portfolio as well. Now, you mentioned a Wall Street Journal broke the news last night or yesterday afternoon about CoreWeave taking a second pass at Core Scientific. So we talked about their initial offer, the price point on yesterday's podcast. Obviously, this was big headlines. You can see CNBC, the likes of major news outlets taking hold of this story. That's a big benefit for the Bitcoin mining sector as a whole. I was on a Spaces last night. They were talking about the amount of new eyeballs that are reassessing essentially the Bitcoin mining space. Maybe people that had taken a look a year or two ago and now are coming back with fresh eyes, looking at the data center HPC component. So phenomenal amount of activity, phenomenal volumes, as you just made reference to, Anthony. And our good friend Tom here actually put this out directly after the announcement, talking about 15 reasons why he feels CoreWeave needs Core Scientific. Now, we won't go through all of these, Anthony, but I thought there were some really good points in here, even down to the human resource or human capital side of things with the talent and the team that's been assembled at Core Scientific. But when you start to look through some of these points, whether it's the infrastructure, the fact that they already have the deal, the fact that CoreWeave is asset light, they need cash, there's a lot of solid points in here that I think really frame today's discussion.
Yeah, absolutely. And bear in mind, CoreWeave, effectively will be paying Core Scientific 850 million per year for the first, effectively once the power's been energized in total 590 megawatts, $850 million a year for effectively the next 22 years because they have a 12-year contract with two 5-year extensions. Now, if they are fortunate enough to have an agreement with Core Scientific, that payment's no longer having to be made. Yes, some of that will be cost because obviously you have to run these facilities. That's what Core Scientific were going to do. They were going to provide obviously the manpower to run the facilities. CoreWeave would obviously put their GPUs into the facilities and negotiate the power with the power supplier. But literally everything else on the site was Core Scientific. So there would be some sort of costs associated with that, but it wouldn't be a significant amount of costs. I mean, we've seen, the breakdown, and we'll come on to it in a second. The breakdown of that contract. It's an extraordinarily good contract for Core Scientific, and yet to be matched by any miner in the space at the moment.
Yeah, most definitely. And that's number one on the list. The fact that CoreWeave gave Core Scientific what he's calling, or Tom's calling, the best deal in data center history. So a great read there, and really appreciated that post. Now, it's no wonder why Tom had 15 reasons and why CoreWeave is so interested in Core Scientific, Anthony. When you look at the deal here, we've got one of your slides showing the metrics or the numbers. Again, full transparency really from day one on behalf of Core Scientific. You start to look at this deal, then you start to look at the fact that the CapEx, for the most part, was put up by CoreWeave and the remaining components of Core Scientific. This is just a phenomenal pickup if CoreWeave is able to ink a deal here.
Yeah, I mean, it started as 200 megawatts back in June last year, but that's expanded to 590 megawatts. Now, in terms of CapEx, CoreWeave are actually funding this to the tune of about $750 million over the first few years as these buildings and infrastructure start getting refurbished. That amount gets paid back, during the first 2 to 3 years of the contract itself, and it doesn't get paid back all immediately. The company are allowed to maintain a 30% margin of the contract, so there's cash coming into Core Scientific. What Core Scientific have to find is they've got to find 104 million to cover effectively the last 70 megawatts of the contract. So not a significant amount for them to find there in terms of the whole value. But it's a really good contract itself in terms of the fact that a client is prepared to give you that cash flow to get these buildings rebuilt. You'd have to go out there and borrow the money because you have to start paying interest on loans, and that causes challenges there. So CoreWeave funding majority of that, probably the region about 80 to 85%. As I say, 12 years with 2 5-year extensions. They've already started energizing the Denton site. So when we get to the end of this quarter, which will be on Sunday, and Core Scientific will issue their next quarterly earnings update, you'll start seeing earnings coming through from the CoreWeave contract for the Denton facility itself, because that was energized back in May. So yes, a small amount of it. By the end of the year, though, we're looking at about 250 megawatts of that 590 being energized, and then the remaining 300 and 40 megawatts, that will be energized during 2026 and the beginning of 2027. So it looks like a 2-year process to get all this refurb and up and running. So extreme contracts, and this is probably why CoreWeave are looking now and thinking, actually, we maybe don't want to have all these, asset-like contracts where we're just providing GPUs and lots of cash flow. We probably want to have some infrastructure to keep things, on the sort of on the control side in a far more easy manner, and maybe saving at the same time, because they'll save a significant amount of the contract that they're paying to Core Scientific, or the future payments of those contracts, if they make a deal now.
Yeah, most definitely. And as it stands now, in 12 years, they essentially hand the keys back over to Core Scientific. So it would keep that infrastructure in the company as well. Now, you talk about infrastructure. This is an important slide. We have a big discrepancy or disparity, I guess, between power pipeline in some of these investor decks, Anthony. Some of the companies refer to fields as power pipelines. Some of them have infrastructure data centers already built. As you can see here, just at the Denton facility, this is an actual concrete brick and mortar building. You can feel it, you can touch it. This is real infrastructure that's currently being retrofitted to Tier 3 status. If you look across their portfolio on a greater scale, Anthony, across the United States, at each one of these sites, you can see buildings are already in place. So compared to a lot of other operators, Core Scientific, when they talk about their power pipeline or this 1.3 gigawatts, this is fairly well developed.
Yeah, no, it's far more developed than what we've seen from other peer providers there. Yes, a lot of these facilities will be needed to be refurbished to the level that they're going to deliver HPC, but that'll be as and when a client is determined, and they've obviously got one client to take a massive amount. They've still got about 400 megawatts of power that they can divert to HPC. And at the same time, still run that Bitcoin mining business with about 19 exahash. So all in all, 3 good strategies going concurrently at the moment.
Yeah, most definitely. Yeah, don't forget about the Bitcoin strategy or the HODL, which is slowly growing away there as well. So now the $1 million question for you, Anthony, put you on the hot seat. What is Core Scientific worth? So we've looked at the deal. We've talked about the company, the infrastructure, the different components here. They are apparently in talks or potential talks to get bought out. The question is, what is the price CoreWeave should be or will need to be paying for Core Scientific? So this obviously started a lot of commotion on the internet last night, on Twitter, on X. You can see here another Anthony actually put together a nice little summary stating price targets ranging anywhere from $16 to $23, some are in the mid 30s, and one analyst or one team has already put out a price target of $48 for Core Scientific. So we're going to walk through these pieces of news, but quite a range here in terms of price targets or potential buyout targets.
Yeah, absolutely. And you've got to remember that there are a number of business models there in that company. They've got the Bitcoin mining business, they've got the HPC business, still got this 400 megawatts of power. They're hodling Bitcoin there at about 1,000 coins at the moment. So lots of elements to consider. And it's interesting, you have the disparity of price targets there ranging from 16 all the way up to 48. I think some of the targets probably would be if they were achieving that 850 million a year now, they're not quite there yet. There's probably another 18 months before they're into that, what we call annualized revenue of 850 million. So at the moment, they're nowhere near that. The fractions of that, we're looking to maybe 20 megawatts is energized or 30 megawatts. By the end of the year, 250, yes, but it will grow to 250 megawatts. It won't go all in one moment in time. And that looks like most of the Denton facility. Well, these other facilities are getting refurbished as well. And then next year it will grow again all the way up then probably to close to 500. And then in early 2027, the remaining 90 megawatts there. So when you're doing the calculations, you have to bear in mind that, how you're going to set the stall out in terms of it. And, it might be that, people are all anticipating the 850 now, but it's going to be about 18 months or 2 years away from achieving that.
Yeah, it certainly is. And it's reminiscent of the Riot Bitfarms buyout, the $2 and change or $2.40, I think, cent offer. A lot of people were calling for $6, $7 at that time, getting very optimistic, potentially counting eggs before they're hatched. So you're right, Anthony. Great contract, $850 million a year. When it's in full swing, we're not quite there. Now, today's episode is special. We rarely give price targets, predictions, but you've done some of your own analytical work. So we're going to save that the best for last, so to speak. But I wanted to get your opinion on some of these other analyst price targets. So Eric Jackson, we've been featuring a lot of his tweets on the channel. He was actually on the call last night, quoting the Cantor Fitzgerald coming out north of $30 per share. You can see Hard Capital posting that article. They feel 30 plus is a good starting point. Wanted to get your thoughts on Cantor here.
Yeah, I mean, Cantor, one of the big, Wall Street investment banks, and they cover many of the mining companies. So they know that this business, they will have also technology stocks with data centers on their books as well, so they can do the valuation. So generally they have models for this, and they'll do calculations based on each part of the business. I don't think $30 is extreme at all, and you'll find out a little bit more of a breakdown when we get to what we put together today ourselves.
Yeah, we certainly will. Now, Penny Ether's the next one I wanted to talk about. He's a large shareholder in Core Scientific, a friend of the channel. We've met up with Penny on many occasions at the conferences, Anthony. Probably known for being more of a pessimist or looking out for risks rather than an optimist. And he talked about that on last night's call as well. He's in the range of 15 to 22.50. Again, basically what you had said is, yes, a lot on the horizon, but at this point in time, you've got to factor in that they're not in full stride yet. Wanted to get your thoughts on maybe a lower or more reserve price target here.
Who knows where the price target's going to end up, and the shareholders will have to agree to it. I mean, it's all right. Core Scientific and Core, we've sat around a table negotiating a price, but that price will have to be taken to the shareholders for them to determine if it's a fair price. And I think when you've got a contract of that size, that's going to run for 22 years. And believe you me, that contract even says even if there's downside, it gets paid. There's no sort of there's no issues. It's a paid contract. And CoreWeave at the moment, valued at $75 billion. So they're probably going to be able to, fulfill that contract itself. I'd be inclined to think, obviously Penny's has been bearish, on a number of stocks in the mining space, but he seems to have come round to Core Scientific of late, seen some of his posts around Core Scientific. He is obviously a shareholder now. Obviously, IREN is looking to go down this route, and Cipher are going down this route there. It just happens that Core Scientific were the first ones to announce a massive deal, and everyone's trying to scramble for something similar. This conversation this week is going to help all the miners with HPC because it really put them on the map now. This is potentially a really big deal, and I think we might see a bigger price expectation than what Penny's putting there at the lower end, maybe towards the top end or more, I'd say.
Yeah, nice to see a range of these price targets, Anthony. And I guess Penny assuming the worst, hoping for the best here, and maybe estimating to the low side. Now, on the other end of things, we've got Kevin Mack, a large presence on social media and in the investment community. He picked up 300,000 shares of Core Scientific yesterday at $16. So talk about making a splash. There's no dollar cost averaging there. He thinks that can go up to 18 to 25. So he's trying to capture the spread there, obviously. That coincides with the next article here from Citizens JMP. They came out with a $48 price target. So on the complete other side of the spectrum here, I would say this is quite optimistic. But in the case of Citizens and Kevin Mack, Anthony, they think this one could run quite a bit higher from here.
It really depends how you're valuing that contract and what multiples you would apply to it, because you can get to $48 if you apply the multiples out there that technology companies are using at the moment. So, if they're using a high multiple and suggesting, say, 25, which isn't unreasonable in this space, then you might well easily get to 48. That's the issue there. So there'll be, more people may be pessimistic towards 15 as a multiple, maybe 20, maybe 25. This is certainly at the higher end of that multiple scale.
Yeah, it definitely is. Now, interestingly enough, talk about optimism. I did a little poll last night on X myself. Over 120 respondents, Anthony, and the majority, 31%, actually expected 30, 35 or higher for the deal. So we'll see where this shakes out. One angle that I wanted to ask you about, I heard on the Spaces last night with Mike Alfred and Penny, talking about this CoreWeave lockup period. So I wanted to get your insights here. Essentially what they were saying was, if this is a stock transaction, or CoreWeave purchases Core Scientific using stock, which they likely could or would, as they don't have a ton of cash on hand, because of this lockup period and the potential impact that may have on CoreWeave's share price, they would actually have to give a premium in terms of shares to make this deal go through, or make Adam and team happy with that deal. So can you give us some insight on that, Anthony?
Yeah, so when a company IPOs, they generally have a lockout period for those initial investors and employees in the company, so they can't sort of sell them all on day one. And so the lockout period for CoreWeave, I believe, is about 6 months, and that 6 month or close to 180 days ends on September the 24th, 2025, at which point those early investors and employees can then start selling their shares. And if you think about where the CoreWeave share price is there'd be some enormous gains to be made straight away. And I would imagine that, like any other company that's been out there, we can look at some of the mining companies who also, after their lockout period, dropped significantly. And actually, an example of that is IREN, because IREN's share price, I think when they came to market, was over $24. And so, in that early period there, when the lockout period happened, a lot of their initial investors took some of their profits off the table, and the share price comes down. I mean, fortunately now it's starting to gain a bit of momentum. It's over $14 today. It has been as high as $16, $17 in the last 12 months, but it still needs to get a bit of momentum to get back to those early IPO issues there. And that's the relevant point, because, if this deal is agreed, and bear in mind, it's understanding that CoreWeave don't have large buckets of cash available at the moment. How's the transaction going to be carried out? Is it going to be a share transaction? So effectively, CoreWeave will just issue more shares and purchase Core Scientific. The date and timing of that will be really interesting, because, as I say, from the 24th of September, if a lot of shares get sold, then the share price will drop significantly. And if they're using a date, and September the 24th is still a few months away. So, if this happens in the near future and you're still using CoreWeave's today price, you might see that drop considerably once those initial shareholders get the ability to sell. So it's a real interesting conundrum for shareholders at the moment. Those in CoreWeave, those in Core Scientific, looking from both sides of this deal, how that's going to play out. And also the fact that when you think about Core Scientific, it's not just about the share price. There's quite a number of warrants out there associated for when they came out of Chapter 11. So, a great many shareholders, including myself, have still got warrants that haven't been converted into shares. Because the warrants themselves give you a sort of, a price based on the current share price and the expected share price. And in certain instances, like we've seen with the core warrants, they've given a premium on those warrants. So, that's why they haven't been sold as quickly as Core Scientific fully expected. There are timelines for both of the warrants that they have to be converted, but the first date is still in 2027, so there's no need to rush out at the moment. However, I would aid caution for people to get some financial advice if they're holding warrants in Core Scientific, and in the event of a buy from CoreWeave, what's the implication of those warrants at that point in time, and whether they feel they may need to do something ahead of that point in time, so they don't start losing out at all.
Yeah, good point you bring up there, Anthony. A unique situation. So I would definitely encourage you guys to do a little bit of research there. I'm not holding the warrants myself, just shares for me. Now, another interesting point that came up last night was essentially the consensus on the spaces was they felt CoreWeave actually leaked this news to the Wall Street Journal, as it was in their best interest to start getting their share price moving in advance of a formal offer. So again, that's hearsay, Anthony, but an interesting strategy. So taking all of that into consideration, you've now taken a swipe at a valuation here as well. Interestingly enough, landing essentially right in the middle of these other analyst price targets. I had done a tweet yesterday, again, complete guess here, not financial advice, saying anywhere from $28 to $32. Your financial analysis landed square in the middle.
Yeah, I mean, and this is just really just looking at the elements of the business they've got there. So they have the mining business, obviously with 19 exahash. We know they're mining 6 Bitcoin a day, so we can do some sort of like calculations. From their latest presentation, they say that the cost to mine a Bitcoin from a cash perspective is about 56,000. So we can use that as a cost there. I put the Bitcoin price at 108,000. It's just 107 today. So 107, 108,000 gives you a ballpark figure there of where we are. And for Bitcoin mining, now we've spoken to, you can speak to mining companies, you can speak to other people, but we've spoken to the Wall Street guys there and said, what multiple of net earnings would you give to a Bitcoin mining company? And, the range was sort of like, between 2 and 4. So I've put 3 in there at the moment. So, maybe it could be higher at 4, but it doesn't make a massive amount of difference. For the actual number of shares, I've actually tried to include the warrants as well, because that's obviously people can convert those warrants very quickly. And so therefore using that figure there. So for the Bitcoin mining business, it doesn't give a great value at the moment. And people will be saying, well, that's very small there. But this is just based on how you're valuing the business that is at the moment, from a whole point of view. Then we look at the HPC co-location, and we take one of those years where they've got the full contract. It was 850 million. We take away the cost that Core Scientific would incur during that year. That gets you down to 604 million per annum. Now, the multiple I've used for this one here is 15. I've been a bit more prudent. I don't want to, to overextend it, at 25. Which might be a reasonable way, but 15, feels okay for the industry. That gives you effective. Then when you look at the shares, that gives you $22 per share just for the HPC colocation business with CoreWeave at the moment. And then bear in mind, we've been informed that of their total, effectively I think it's 1.3, 1.4 megawatts of power in total. They've got about 400 megawatts that they want to push towards high performance compute in the future. And Adam is at the moment having conversation on what that's going to look like. It's probably going to be in smaller deals, maybe 70 to 100 megawatt deals. And that will sort of tie in with the number of sites that they've got and the size of those sites. When you look at the slide that shows the infrastructure there, they've got quite a few sites dotted around the US there. All ranging from sort of like, some of the smaller sites from 20 megawatts all the way up to sort of the Denton site there, which is well over 250 megawatts. So if you think about, co-location, some of those sites there, what they've got available after the CoreWeave deal, it's probably going to be smaller amounts of maybe 70 to 100 megawatts, which falls in line there. So I've given that also valuation based on what the market's suggesting at the moment, how you would value HPC sites at $7 million per megawatt. And so that adds about $6.93. Now, when you take the whole of those three together to have one business, it gives you a total share price valuation of about $30.18. So it's probably right in the middle of where it needs to be. Now, there will be, this is just, a very quick 10-15 minute put together table this morning. It's just really trying to show people those are the numbers we saw from those articles and points there. But behind those numbers, how do people start valuing businesses? And this just gives you an insight into doing that. I am not putting this is just a figure that I've used today. If I spent more time and got more information, I'd probably be able to do a lot better job. But we thought we'd get something out there on the podcast today to highlight the potentials there using some of the assumptions that some of the Wall Street guys use when they put their valuations together. So when you see some of these companies that say we've now re-rated the share price for this particular company, sometimes they'll tell you how they've done that. And so I'm trying to come up with a way of how I value, rather than just say, I think it's $30, I'll give you a little bit more insight into how I've got to that figure. And please, be critical, because this took like 10 minutes to do. It wasn't a long piece of work at all. And it's quite, fairly straightforward. But it comes out with a number, and it's sort of in the middle of the ballpark there. So, who knows? It could be $20, it could be $30. It could be $48 if we're really lucky. I'm hoping it's $48 because I've got shares in Core Scientific. I've also got shares in some of those other miners with potential to go into HPC, and those shares have done really well as well. So it's a good all-round position there. But as I say, this is really just for emphasizing how some of these investment companies put together valuations for some of these stocks.
Yeah, it's a great example or case study there, Anthony. And obviously factors like HODL, the actual machines, we haven't pieced all that in, but it's a good starting point at least. And the big takeaway for me is how obvious it is as to why the miners are moving away from Bitcoin mining. When you look at what component or percentage of the company's value comes from Bitcoin mining versus the HPC, you can clearly see why so many people are transitioning. And again, I like how you're a little more conservative. You use the 7 million instead of maybe the 12 for some of the higher end retrofitted data centers. And then the multiple on HPC, we've heard 20, 25 commonly in the industry. So using a 15 is fairly prudent there, I would say as well. So I appreciate you putting that one together. Now, the second component here, you guys, let us know in the comment section, what do you think about that 30, whether you're over, under, or what you think is fair for Core Scientific. The second component here is this rising tide effect. Or rising tide lifts all ships. So as you alluded to in the intro there, we're seeing a lot of activity in the IRENs, the Ciphers, the Riots, other companies that have infrastructure or data center plans in place to develop HPC locations. So the first one I wanted to kick off here, Cipher, their Black Pearl site, this just activated or energized this month. We've heard a lot of discussion about Tyler Page's team, their ability to construct data centers, and this Black Pearl asset.
Yeah, I mean, that's just been energized, as you quite rightly say. And, now, using 150 megawatts of that 300 towards the Bitcoin mining, and that hash rate will grow now, by a further, I think, 9 exahash to get them to their target by the end of the year. That leaves 150 megawatts of power on that site there, which would quite nicely, host a HPC client. Cipher have also got a number of other sites, 4 or 5 other sites there with significant size, land, power, and all the attributes that you need for HPC. Obviously, they're not anywhere near developed as the Black Pearl site, but it shows that Cipher are going down that route of preparing themselves for growth. And they're one of the companies, when you talk about mining companies that are accredited with building good data centers and having that staff who have got that experience, Cipher is one of those companies that crops up in all those conversations, building great data centers, and trusted as a data center builder as well. So when you go into these meetings with hyperscalers and prove that you can deliver, Cipher are one of those companies that probably can go in there and say, well, this is what we've done here already. So they're probably one of the leading companies. And actually, if you look at the share price this week, it's done extremely well, especially with that energization and also with the news now coming out, because they're uniquely placed to deliver some serious high performance compute power towards a new client.
Yeah, they certainly are. So, continuing on with this HPC re-rate theme, again, something we've talked about extensively on the channel, that at some point the market is going to have to wake up to the fact that these are no longer pure play Bitcoin miners and start re-rating these stocks. You mentioned the caliber of talent within Cipher. Another one we've heard a lot about is IREN. They're setting records in terms of how fast they can bring exahash and data centers online. I know they were putting up 50 megawatts of data centers per month at one point last year. They've got Horizon 1. Dan's already alluded to a potential client by Q4. This one's coming along at a very fast pace, liquid cooled, so on the higher end in terms of data center outfitting. And they've got Sweetwater 1 and 2, Anthony. So IREN, similar to Cipher, catching a bid this week and looking very optimistic.
Yeah, this facility looks from the renderings looks fairly amazing, and this is going to be completed in Q4, ready for a client to move into there. So Dan's quite rightly said on the podcast he expects to name a client in Q4, and so the anticipation is waiting there. Obviously, they've also had a lot of conversations about this, and it's certainly certainly with the size and available power there, will deliver a good size HPC service for that particular area. But yeah, IREN, also in the same way as Cipher, another one that in the same conversation, who can do this and who can't, they're certainly in the can do column. And also the fact we've got Sweetwater 1 and 2, which is another 2 gigawatts. Now we know Sweetwater 1 and 2 still have to have a lot of work done there, but they've got a plan in place to do that. In 2026, 2027, those sites will get the same treatment that Childress has had over the last 18 months to get to where it is today. They've done this before. They can redo this model, and they'll take that model to Sweetwater and do it there as well. I've got real high expectations. The markets obviously likes IREN at the moment. The retail investors like IREN at the moment. Not there's too many in the space actually coming out with their own ideas about it, which is great for to see all this analysis coming out there, because you can have a look at it and then 6 months later you can go back and say, how did it turn out in there? But actually, I've met a lot of people in this space. We were fortunate to go to Vegas and meet up with some of the guys that deliver great analysis, and it's great to have them in the space doing this. IREN are sort of leading the way in terms of popularity in 2025, and hopefully that continues.
Yeah, most definitely. And speaking about going back and taking a look at older content, we got a classic here that aged well from Rex Finance as well. So interesting to take a look back, Anthony. Now, another company that's rapidly expanding, Riot Platforms. So they've had their feasibility study completed for Corsicana. The X factor here, Anthony, is the size of this facility. So we're talking hundreds and hundreds of megawatts. They're also purchasing additional land adjacent to the property to essentially aid in data center design, opening up new optionality for the planners or the new potential clients. So this is another one that popped yesterday on the CoreWeave news, and potential for a massive contract.
Yeah, I mean, we've been very fortunate. We've been able to go to this site and look at that first 200 megawatts of data mining facilities energized, and look at the build out on the next 200 megawatts. Now they've decided to use remaining 600 megawatts towards high performance compute. It's a perfect site, has everything there. It has the water, has the power, has the infrastructure, and has the connectivity. All those things that you require from a good HPC delivery. And being within less than an hour away from Dallas, you've got a great city there located as well that can benefit from these types of services. So hopefully we get the same again from a lot of these companies are coming out there with great opportunities. We're just now waiting for really names to come into the hat, and clients to be signed up.
Yeah, it's interesting you talk about the feasibility study, some of those prerequisites or check boxes. We've even heard in some of these conversations the level of granularity these hyperscalers go to. They want to know if these properties or projects are within a designated flight path for aircraft or an airport, potentially a problem if an aircraft were to crash into your data center, also adjacent to rail lines. So there's all kinds of complexity, which is why these contracts take so long to execute. Now, Bitfarms is an interesting one, Anthony. So they too have come out, Panther Creek renderings. They've started their feasibility study there. They've already got the Macquarie financing. They've unlocked the first 50 million. They've got a whole portfolio from Stronghold that meets those checkboxes we just talked about. However, I'm not sure if it's the Riot selling pressure or what the case is here. They're not necessarily responding in the same way as some of these other HPC plays.
Yeah, we're not seeing that at the moment. Share price is depressed in comparison to a lot of other share prices that over the last month or so have done really well. It can't be helped, obviously that what's going on with right now, selling that investment. I don't think Bitfarms wanted to see that happening as quickly. There probably was an expectation that Bitfarms would recover the share price and then at least give the share price chance to get to a level and then start selling the shares, but they're selling the shares at the sort of 80 cents level from what we've seen from those updates from Riot. But you made a key point there. I mean, those sites that they bought from Stronghold Mining and changed the direction where the company is going. They sold, some of their big Paraguay sites to Hive Digital, so to get them out of South America and to focus, the majority now of their business in the US itself. Panther Creek, we were lucky to go down to Fort Lauderdale. We met with some people down there who sort of had heard a lot of things about Panther Creek, and it really does tick all the boxes there. However, the challenge now for Bitfarms is how they're going to deliver that in terms of financing. They've got the Macquarie funding there, but if you look at the share price at the moment, the valuation of the company, it's now sub 400 million. That makes it a challenge to raise capital in terms of how many shares you'd have to sell to get a reasonable amount of capital. And they've got a lot of shares in the book at the moment, over 500,000 shares. So it's going to be it is a challenge. Events have not been from their doing, and we'll just have to see how this one plays out. But they have got potential in terms of they have got sites. The Sharon site as well is a site there, and so they can work through these sites, maybe partner up with another client and do it as a joint venture, maybe an opportunity that way. I mean, the chances are. We spoke with Ben about potentially selling sites, to raise capital. To if you've got 4 sites and you wanted to sort of refurbish 3 of them, you could sell one site to give you the funding to do that. Maybe that's something they could think about as well. But again, this is going to be a challenging period over this next 6 months as other miners start to announce clients. Will Bitfarms be one of those that announces a client too?
Yeah, the only thing I'll say there, I guess the glass half full is I would assume most of the Riot selling pressure is priced into the market. I think anyone who wanted to get out of Bitfarms probably would have by now, but yeah, tough situation for Ben and team, Anthony. And as you say, especially in this industry, whether you're talking about Bitcoin mining or HPC, it's so CapEx heavy and intensive. You need the ability to raise money quickly, and a lot of it. So with that being said, another company, interestingly enough, making headlines this week, Digital, another CEO that was frustrated with share price. He's taken this into his own hands now, Anthony. So we talked about the news yesterday. Today, or last night, we're getting reports that Sam Tabar has come out purchasing 750,000 shares at $2 a piece for a $1.5 million personal investment. This is big news.
Yeah. I mean, he's putting his money where his mouth is. I mean, he believes the company should be valued higher than it is. We've had him on the channel many times. They've got a great business model there. They're not focusing too much on the mining side anymore. That was the biggest revenue driver of the last few years. But HPC in these last couple of quarters has decided to obviously improve significantly. Now that's their main focus. So they're really ramping up HPC. Over 23 clients now. Go back 12 months ago, it was 1 client. So they're really focused on delivering that there. They can see the margins. So the company's just not getting the valuation that they're expecting from the market. Maybe the market looking at them too much as a Bitcoin miner, when in theory, Bitcoin mining probably represents maybe 20% of the company in terms of revenues now. So he's got to put, his own money where his mouth is, and let's see how that plays out. When we see CEOs put, I mean, that's a big amount of money to go in there. When we see CEOs put that money in there, they must have an idea, something that we don't. So let's see how the share price is doing okay today compared to yesterday. We know that the drop from where it was, I think $2.36 before they made the announcement for the dilution, it dropped down to sub $2. It was back above $2 today, and maybe some of that news that came out from Sam purchasing has helped the share price to get back above $2. But it's certainly a company to watch. I mean, their valuation at the moment is just above 300 million. It was 600 million not too long ago. And they have got now, they're going to be talked about very shortly of having a crypto hodl getting close towards their market capitalization as well, because they hold not only Bitcoin, but they have one of the largest stacks of Ethereum as well. And that's going to be increased with the money they've raised for the dilution. That 150 million is going to be put into Ethereum for staking purposes, and that will grow their Ethereum hodl significantly. And you think the market capitalization at 320, they're going to have crypto holdings probably about the same as the market capitalization, which then doesn't account for any of the infrastructure or the actual GPUs stroke mining machines that they have as part of the business.
Most definitely. And another great example of a CEO buying shares in their own company, Anthony. So always like to highlight that on the channel.
That's for another day.
That's for another day, Anthony. We'll leave that one. Two final pieces, you guys. Newsletter comes out every Friday. Just came out today. We're featuring Soluna in this one. Great opportunity to get some behind the scenes data, insights into the mining space. It's free. It's weekly, and it's the way to sign up for Miner Madness 4.0. So as soon as you sign up for the newsletter, we're going to send you a registration form. You fill it in with your picks, and that's the way to enter the competition this time around. You're going to want to make sure you enter, because we're going to be doing a grand prize interview with the leader on both the analyst and regular board, in addition to all of the regular prizing that we normally do as part of the competition. The other piece here, Miner Madness itself, closing out end of day Monday. That'll be the final day of trading in Q2 here, Anthony. A successful competition. Sega are really running away with it this time around, picking all three, home runs for the quarter. But a phenomenal competition. Not our best showing personally, but we're happy everyone made money.
Yeah, it's been a great competition.
Thanks so much, you guys. We'll see you back here on Monday. Make sure you let us know in the comment section below, what is your magic number in terms of Core Scientific. Have a great weekend. We'll see you back here soon.